watching the most unique automotive channel on YouTube, the Hoosier Garage.
So hello, welcome back. I'm Adam, and you've come to the Hoosier Garage. We've got some mechanical stuff going on. I actually had a guy a while back who said,
Why don't you do more engine stuff on your channel? We want to see engine stuff.
"Are you happy?" And I know it's going to be,
Well, that's not high performance enough.
well, I'm sorry. This is my build. You do what you want to do, and you start your own channel, Mr. Zero Video Guy. So what we got here is an Edelbrock Performer 318/360. It's aluminum, so it's lightweight. These are pretty much like the cast iron 4-barrel intakes of the 70s, even into the 80s. The benefit is they are aluminum. Okay, they're a lot lighter. They have kind of the same high-rise pattern. They might be a little higher-rise, and you have the bigger ports, so it may not be ideal on a 273 if you got one of those, and maybe not even the best on the 318, but it's primarily for that, just kind of a stock replacement. And what you can put on that is this 600 Edelbrock. Pretty common. You see these everywhere, really. The 1406 model, and we'll have to secure some studs so we can put them on there. We got our gaskets for it. And yeah, so we're going to do a replacement of the old single plane cast iron 2-barrel intake and Carter 2-barrel carburetor, which I rebuilt the carburetor, but I think there was a little bit of wear in the pivot shaft for the butterflies down the bottom as we sprayed carb cleaner on there, tried to do vacuum leak situation, and we found it, and the RPM raised significantly and couldn't kind of get that worked out. So I think as we was driving it, it was probably doing okay there for a while, but then either a spot broke free or wore, I don't know, couldn't get it to run worth anything after that. So we decided might as well move planes up for this, up the current, and get this going. But Just Mopar Joe, who we'll put up a link up in the corner, he's one of our friends of the channel. He sent us these Felpro composite gaskets. Appreciate him doing that. He got a great channel over there, by the way. If you want to see a lot of the engine stuff, that's a good place to go. Actually, one of the top places I would go on the internet. And you know, you don't want to listen to just anybody, but I listen to him on stuff. A lot of thoughtful, diagnostic kind of thing, and he knows his Mopars really well. So check that out. We have our instructions. We want to make sure, just go over this stuff, make sure whether we speak carburetor or carburetor, that we are doing it right. And we're going to need the EGR plate here, have to clean it up. It'll go over here and put some paint on it, all that kind of thing. So in the meantime, we're going to take the 2-barrel system off and start putting this on. One of my big kind of peeves, I guess, about Edelbrock here, brand new intake in the box, and you have all these extra holes for whether it be cinders or whatever it is you're using. One of them is for your nipple for the heater hose system, but the rest of them you would plug off if you're keeping a basic setup. Well, they didn't give you any plugs, so you got to order the plugs separately, and it's usually like another $15. And they have the big Allen head, and you screw them in with a little bit of putty on them. But they didn't get any of them, nothing. They gave us this, which was great, so I got that, some dope on it there on the tape dope, and screwed them in. So we're good there. We'll just have to get some plugs, and of course that's going to slow you down, but we'll live. And let's get started tearing the top of this thing off. So I think before you start, if you're not familiar with doing any of this stuff at all, your distributor, that operates the good bulk of your timing, okay? So if you're going to take this loose so you can get better access to the intake, just make a mark on the actual distributor pad, which is the gray aluminum base here, and make another mark down here on the block. Just a little check mark. So that way you go to put it back in, that'll line up. And if you take your cap loose here, see how this is pointing towards your little vacuum pot here? Just put a little mark here if you have to. That way when you go to put it back in, it's not turned around the other way, because it'll be either on the mark or it'll be 180 out, okay? So that way you'll know, oh, it's pointing here and that's there, and it'll put you right back to where you was before you started all this. Then you don't have to go look up and refigure it out. So, but we're going to take all this loose anyways. I think the timing, we're going to go ahead and readjust it. So we'll just take it all out in one piece and worry about that later. Now this wire that runs from the wiring harness into the coil, that's on your plus or your positive side. It'll have your little radio suppressor deal on there. We'll want to get this loose. And I'm just going to go ahead and transfer the bracket with the coil over to the new intake. We're going to disconnect that first so it's free. We'll just thread the nut back on there. And we're ready to go. Here's the 2 screws for that. Now this bracket down here, some of these earlier ones have this little canister here. And it'll be in the way if we go to take the intake off. So I'm going to go ahead and just slip it out of the way. We'll just thread the screw back into the head so we don't lose track of it. This is your oil sender right here. The lead just slips off there. Just keep it from pulling any wires when we take all this loose. Go ahead and pop this carburetor off since it's the obvious issue here. Now you'll have your return spring here on the lever and your throttle spring there. That'll allow you to slip the arm off for kick down. And then for these vans, they're a little different than the cars. They don't have a throttle cable, they have a throttle arm because the pedal is over there and it just runs off this lever. So you'll have a little cotter pin, which the throttle cables have the little pin too. This one's just more of a straight cotter pin. And then straighten it out. Give it a pull, don't lose it. Put it where you won't lose it. Disconnect that. And with the exception of some of the hoses and the fuel line, should be free to pull off, so we'll get that ready. Oh, and our choke has a little clip on the arm. You pull it out and there's your clip, okay? It's best to just slip it back on the arm and snap it down so you don't lose that. Go ahead and pop the fuel line loose. Pull it out of the way. We'll probably have to make a totally new one, as the output on the carburetor, or the input I should say, is not in the front, in the center like that one is. Pull that off, and then pull this one off. We're out on that. Now on the intake and some of this other stuff, they use the same bolts to hold the kick down throttle bracket tray on. So I'm going to go ahead and Bust those loose. Just clear all the brackets so we can make a nice clean pull when we're ready. So our intake bolts are all going to look about like that, okay? They're all pretty good length on them. Pull this out just to make it a little easier access. And you can just hang this over to the side. Nothing else is really loose on it. Your kick down rod, watch the spring here, don't lose it, and you can swing it over as well. And if you're never sure, before you start, take some pictures. Sometimes you can't find the service manual layouts of how everything's supposed to situate. So if you take pictures first and it was fine before, good chance it'll work close after. We might have a little bit of adjusting to do due to the arm, the throttle arm on the 4-barrel carburetor might be a different location, so we might have to do some fabrication or even just basic adjusting, but we'll worry about that when we get there. So a couple other things that I removed was there's the vacuum block for the power brake system. It was right here. We just took that off. This is what screwed into it. So we just swung it aside. It's on a rubber hose up there. Here's your sending unit, the factory sending unit. We'll leave that down until we get some of this coolant drained, which I have draining right now. And the throttle return bracket that put here, it's going to need a little bit of tweaking to fit on the manifold because there's a big stump right here that keeps it from working as it would have here. See, this hole is a little pilot hole, so it keeps it from turning. Well, on the intake manifold we're going to put on here, that does not exist. You might be able to hear it, but we're draining. Look right down through there. See that? We've got the petcock open and doing its stuff. So it's going to drain down a little bit, so at least we can get the coolant level lower than the intake so we don't have a big mess. Go down into the oil valley. There's always going to be a couple drips in there, but we want to keep from having a big bomb of water go down there. So we're going to let that drain down real good and then proceed. Take the hose loose, take the housing off of the thermostat. That is all new, so we're going to swap it over to the new one. And then the nipple here, it screws in to the intake. If we can get that out, we'll just transfer it over as well. And then the rest of the bolts for the intake will pop loose, and you can kind of pry it loose, pull it out of there. It's always best to kind of clean these areas, because once you pop this out, it's going to shake all that loose and it's going to want to slide right down inside in the valley there. So it's always good to wipe all this down first, get any loose dirt out of the way so you have the least amount of crap as possible to go down in there. Okay, so some of you are familiar with this, but when you get these intake off, I went ahead and cleaned all this up. But there's these little pins, little roll pins actually. There's one right here in this hole, and there's one right here, and they're both in the center. And before you put a aftermarket intake on, you want to be sure to take these out, because usually the aftermarket intakes are not pre-drilled for that. So you could set it down on there and you would have a little wobble naturally, but some people with the gaskets raising them up, they would go to torque it down and it would bust your intake clean in half. So make sure you either have it drilled or you just simply take them out. And I took a set of vice grips and just clamped it and kind of worked them out. Came out real easy. So just remember that when you're inside of here. I've got all this wiped down, so what I'm going to do next is maybe shoot a little paint on here, just kind of blow all this off. Try not to get anything up in here. I'll check it just for any debris. I also make sure to, since you can see all the push rods here, to give it a little crank and see if they all move up and down evenly, and they do. There's no dead cylinders or dead wiped out cam lobe action there. So I did put a little black mark on each one with a marker, and you can see it move a lot easier. Alright, so I'm doing some fitment of the gaskets here. The composites on the side that Just Mopar Joe sent us. Very common, you can get them in any parts store. Sometimes they have to order them. Around here they had to order them, and he happened to have them, so I just got them from him. So if you're going to ship them, you know, let's do it that way. So we got the gaskets lined up here. They're not glued in yet. I just have like a test fit. I like to use the cork ones. Some guys don't. They like to put a nice, even but thick group of gasket maker across there in place of this on both ends. They have the hole in it for the dowel pins, like I showed you earlier, that I took out because of the aluminum intake. So you can just line it over top of the hole. That's how you know really where it goes. And they also help hold these gaskets up if you don't have the little push inserts to lock them into place. Now, one thing with these gaskets that you might run into is sometimes you have to take the valve cover completely off on one side, if not both sides. This one I was able to just loosen it to where I have these two screws out, and I can just tilt it back and I can set it up in there. We'll be able to set the intake down in there, and then this can kind of clamp back over top of it. Okay, so I got a little ahead of myself. I went ahead and stuck the intake down, but I really meant to put a little bit of the gray sealant around the coolant ports, all four corners here, okay? And then I just put a little skin real thin. Just I put a little bead on there, a couple places here, and just smeared it on. So you don't want a big ball of it. That'll make it push away. Okay, did the same thing up there. Make sure you seal all the way down. See, this is a lot wider on this part of the cork gasket over here. So make sure you come back all the way to that corner. That's the sealing surface. Okay, now I'll go ahead and put the gaskets back in, and then when I do, I'm going to put another coat of the gray, just a smear all the way around here, okay, and then on all four, okay, and then we'll replace the manifold. So make sure you have all your ducks in a row before you go holding it all down. So we saved it just in time. Been a while since I've done one. All right, so I'm getting the bolts in here. These four in the middle are always a pain, especially over here, since the spread bore pattern and the choke stove opening kind of makes it a tight fit. But you could use one of these style boxed in wrenches, because you know your socket even on one of those isn't going to fit. You can't get an extension long enough. You can kind of get one there, but then it drops down deep enough and it doesn't work. So use your drops box in wrench, and you can work it down. I went ahead and stuck the bracket here under these two bolts. Nothing is tightened down yet. I still have to get the throttle return bracket fitted under that one, but I'm just trying to get everything kind of even on the subject of the bolts here. A couple things of note that I'll probably have to do some adaptation to. This is for our power brakes, right? On the other manifold it was over here, but it won't work on this one because the thread's here, and this has a wide swath of, when you screw it down in there, it's not going to work there unless you maybe put some extension, but then it might be in the way of this. So you put it here, and therefore it would probably make it too long, even if we kind of took some of the bend out of it. So what I might have to do is get a new piece of line with one of these fittings, or take this one off, cut it off, and reuse the threaded fitting here. And you see it goes up here into this rubber, so it'd be simple enough to just make a new one if we need to. But we'll get all the basics done first and see what we can do there. I hate to talk to you like this is some kind of how-to thing, because you know I've done this several times and really never had any trouble, but I think some guys probably are much better at it as far as getting all the little quirks and things out of it. But I mean, as far as leaks, we shouldn't have any trouble. I've done it this way quite a bit in the past and no real issues. A lot of this is just adapting certain areas like this. When we put our distributor in, the coil position might be a little different than the original, and it might cause the little canister that you have on the side here to maybe have a little issue, but I haven't gotten that far yet. I'm going to whittle away at this, see what we can get in the way of getting all the bolts ready to go, and then we'll start torquing them down. But so far so good. Actually probably 3 hours into this. I'm just taking my time doing things as I go here, and I'm leaving the finish on here natural. In the past I've done a lot of matching the blue or orange, whatever, if I have an aluminum intake, but this one I decided to go kind of old school and leave it bare. And since I'm kind of getting down in here, it'd be scratching it up anyways, and I'd have to touch it up, so I'm just going to go along with this. But oh, another thing, we did get the nipple transferred over from the cast iron intake. I took a propane torch and just let it set on the cast iron intake for probably about 5 minutes. I took some vice grips and this thing just worked itself right out, no problem. I put some anti-seize on it and screwed it down in there and tightened it in. I put some Teflon tape on the sending unit situation here for the water. It's got one right here on top of the port, so I screwed that down. It's good to go. I used Teflon on this one. And we have the offset style water neck over here, whereas the other one it was set center. This is kind of for later models that had the air conditioning pump a little closer, so that's why it's a little bit different there. And it has 2 different bolt patterns for the different sizes, so one kind of goes this way, one goes that way. One was a little bigger than the other. We'll have to put a plug on this, which I have one on another engine. I have one of these, it's like a square top plug. We'll put that in there. Yeah, so we'll jump on here when we get to the next real step, getting some of this other stuff hooked up, and we'll have to leave it be with some other things like the plug situation I talked about earlier there. So all fun stuff. Hopefully no big headaches, so stay tuned for that.
And now, a classic Indiana car commercial.
At Whitewater Conversions, you can save thousands of dollars on a new luxury van. Like an 85 Ford luxury van with air conditioning, cruise control, captain's chairs, and much more for as low as $12,990. We have on-the-spot financing, factory warranties, and quality service. Why pay retail prices when you can buy direct from the manufacturer?
Whitewater Conversions, a division of Whitewater Ford Lincoln Mercury, State Road 1 in Connorsville, Indiana.
Come on over to Connorsville, USA, and save a lot of money.
So I guess this is as good a time as any to get out of the van for a little bit. But these studs, I like to use the original ones. They're a little more durable, it seems like, than just taking a piece of, stock like that, but a little smaller. And I like to get them out, but they're usually frozen. They're pretty good. So you got to go to the heat. And it might be a little tedious, but it's worth it once you get them out. They have that little, like an earthworm has that big knot in the middle of it. These kind of have that same thing, and that's a good little section to grab onto without screwing the threads up. Or you can, of course, double nut it, screw that one down a little further, take one of these other ones, put on it, and lock them together, and you can take your wrench and work the whole thing out. But I'm going to try this method again. Seems to be pretty successful, but we got to really lay the heat on this cast iron for a little bit, maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and it should work right out of there. So you saw the beginning of this episode looking out the window and it was raining. Well, the reason I was upset was I was looking to get the 2K primer on this fan. But with that much rain, it would have had too much humidity and the primer wouldn't have done that good. So I needed something to do, so I went ahead and jumped on this. So now you know. There we go. We're not screwing the threads up. Now the threads going into the cast iron itself are a coarser thread than the ones on top. So that's another good reason I like to just use kind of the factory style stuff. So we'll put that one over here and get the other 3 out the exact same way. Alright, so we're going to probably stop here for the night and get through the gaskets iron because we have the studs on here now. They just screwed right in. I used some anti-seize since we're putting them in the aluminum intake. You don't want to get them frozen in there and all that good stuff. So we put some anti-seize on there, screwed them in nice and snug, and just probably to keep it all covered up, we'll put a cap over this. Set it on there. So it kind of gives you a different look. Looks a little bit tougher, a little bit beefier, but not that big a difference. But we got a nice electric choke on here. We'll have to wire that in and get all the linkage hooked up, get all the little plugs taken care of, and our housing for the water. stuff like the bypass. You make sure that's, we got both hoses on there so we can stick that back on to that. And I'm gonna go ahead and just run the nuts on there for now, but for now, we're just gonna call it a night, and we'll come back around for a part 2. And hope you're enjoying this and see how we do. I'm anxious to get it going again. I actually enjoy driving this van, even though it's got manual steering. It's like you're driving a big rig or something. But when it comes to the paint and the insects, want to get the 2K on here. Maybe I can do that tomorrow evening or something. And I've got the rear doors off right now, and those doors are right here, and we have some stuff brewing on these. This is the only work that needs to be done body wise on the van at this point. I've got the bottom cut off here. That's what this is. It's a little thin down through there. I just got messing with it, didn't care for it that much. And I'm gonna do the same thing on the other door. It's got some spots that are a little smaller than that one there, but they run down through there. And we have hopefully a solution for this. But what I did was I cut off the skin here all the way around. I just ground it down in a matter of about 2 or 3 minutes, and then was able to just pop this off and then take the rest of the lip that wraps around the back sides like you're familiar with there. Okay. And I used our rust stuff, so we've gotten all the rust off of it, and there was rust on that lip. So that'll be next as far as the body. Get these straightened out, or get the pieces welded on there. Then we'll put them back on the van, block everything down, get them nice and straight, and then we'll be ready. Well, we got a 2K, the back section, the doors, the corners, the hood, final seal, and then we should be ready for paint. And we're getting excited for that because it's getting close to fall, and we want to get it before the cold weather comes. So with that said, I'm messy and I'm tired. I'm gonna go in and have some supper. Thanks for coming to the Hoosier Garage. Thanks for commenting, liking, sharing. We hit our 1,000 the other week. Really appreciate that. All of you for coming to the Hoosier Garage for whatever reason, be it the van, the duster, the commercials, the voiceover. Thanks, Paul Poteet. And we'll see you next time here in the Hoosier Garage.
Be sure to visit the Hoosier Garage store for original artwork t-shirts, hoodies, decals, and posters. And make sure you stay tuned for your chance to win and get your ride included in the collection.